So, in a previous video, I put out how dumb I thought it was for any politician, any Conservative especially, to stand behind Dominic Cummings. And the reason for this is because he blatantly broke quarantine rules. I mean, like, this isn't up for debate. He admitted he knew he was infected and he drove 260 miles. That breaks quarantine rules. And then in his own statement, defending what he did, as he said what he did wasn't wrong, despite the fact that he broke quarantine rules, knowing he was infected, he admitted to breaking the law. He said he didn't think he could drive back to London, so he put his 4-year-old in a car and decided to do a 60-mile drive. That's breaking the law. If you tell a copper you don't think you can drive and then you get behind the wheel, the copper's going to take your license off of you. You kind of have to be competent with these things. Now, I mentioned a number of politicians in that video who were backing him. One of them is my MP for Dover and Deal, Natalie Elphicke. Now, I have not been a fan of Natalie Elphicke. She stood as a Conservative. That really tells me a lot of what I need to know. In her very first vote in Parliament, she voted to get rid of workers' rights. In the past couple of weeks, she voted to essentially get rid of food standards as well. And I've got into other Brexit videos as to why that's kind of really a dumb idea. But I sent her an email saying something along the lines of, given that Dominic Cummings has now exposed himself and has admitted that he broke quarantine rules, though he doesn't view it that way, and admitted that he broke the law, are you going to change your position? She sent me an email on Friday the 29th, Friday 29th of May. And it is as follows. Dear Mr. Moore, thank you for your email. The pandemic and the lockdown this has required. The pandemic and the lockdown this has required. There should be a comma in there, surely. This has required has been a very difficult and frightening time for everyone. Each and every one of us has had to make very difficult decisions and sacrifices. Many have seen loved ones fall ill, and tragically many lives have been lost to the virus. Yes, currently, time of recording, the Office of National Statistics has put the death toll, the actual death toll is over 60,000 people in the United Kingdom. Now we are moving forward to recovery. We worry there could be a second bounce, there absolutely bloody will be, and about how we are going to repair our economy. Indeed, what life itself is going to be like in the post-pandemic era, where we may need to take measures like social distancing for a long time to come. So I completely understand that anyone flouting the rules will make people very angry, especially when each and every one of us has been making such great sacrifices. Many of us have suffered such great losses. Lockdown only works when we all do it. So we are in a very real sense in it all together. All in it together, excuse me. I've spent many hours checking the guidelines, considering the rules and trying to advise constituents on some very difficult and unusual situations. Side comment to this, over the weekend we found out that Boris Johnson's own sister was ignoring the quarantine rules, was ignoring the guideline rules. And again, if you do go through the quarantine rules, the guidelines, Dominic Cummings broke them. This is a man who came up with them and he broke them. He knew he was infected. He travelled 260 odd miles to get to his parents, bypassing friends and family who lived a lot closer, some in London with him. And other people who had done similar things were fined. That's all this was. A fine, a £60 fine. Dominic Cummings can afford that, but still refuses that he's done anything wrong. Back to Mrs. Elphicke's response. It is therefore not surprising that people would be angry if Dominic Cummings had flouted the rules and got away with it. Well, he has, and he has got away with it. I have received a very large number of emails, including your own. People have written to me with very strong views and support, as well as opposition to the actions of Mr. Cummings. And take a side note, I know someone who supports Dominic Cummings, and essentially it's come down to, well, he's a Brexiteer, isn't he? He can do what he wants. That's the kind of people who were supporting Dominic Cummings. I am writing in the same terms to those who have written to me in support of Mr. Cummings, as well as those who have written in opposition to him. I have very carefully considered what everyone has to say and what Mr. Cummings himself has had to say about the matter. In case you have not seen Mr. Cummings' full statement, I set it out here, and she gives me the transcript. I did see it, which is how I know he admitted to breaking the quarantine rules, though he does not see it as a bad thing, and he also admitted to breaking the law. Again, he's gotten away with it. You may know that the matter was this week also considered by Durham Police, and that they have decided to take no police action. In case you have not seen it, the Durham Police had this to say, and then she gives me the statement from Durham Police. I did read the statement from Durham Police, and essentially what it says is, if we had caught Dominic Cummings, if we knew what he was doing, we wouldn't have allowed him to do it. It's important to note that the police do not decide what's right and wrong. That's the job of the courts. Dominic Cummings is not going to go to court, as this was not a imprisonable offence. This was a £60 fine. He's not going to go to court for a £60 fine. And he's not going to go to court unless it's pushed. Now, here's the thing. People in general can't push this because then it does become way too political. And this isn't a political matter. Before he came out and gave his statement, he was unequivocally guilty of breaking quarantine guidelines because he knew he was infected and he drove 260 miles. He knew he was a carrier. He knew he was spreading this virus, and he did it anyway. Then he came out in his statement where he got challenged because we found out he went to Warren Castle, and he had to come up with something. And his excuse was, well, I didn't think I could drive the 260 miles back to London, so instead I drove 60 miles to a castle. 60 miles round trip. That's illegal. That breaches actual road laws. Because his admission, his excuse is, I didn't think I could actually see well enough to get back home, so I put my 4-year-old in a car and decided to drive 60 miles instead, just to see if I could do it. That's illegal. And it also completely destroys every single defense of he's just doing what a good father does to protect his kid. No. A good father who questions his eyesight does not put his child in the car and then drive said car. Having considered the evidence carefully, it seems that Mr. Cummings has made a very full statement that he was doing his very best to deal with serious family challenges in the most difficult circumstances. It also weighs heavily with me that Durham Police say Mr. Cummings did not commit an offence by locating himself at his father's house. They say there might have been a minor breach of regulations, but in these matters, might is not the same as was. Moreover, they say there is no case for taking further action, and crucially that he did not breach social distancing, so did not put anyone at risk. And then gives another short statement from Durham Police. But here's the thing. as I previously stated, the police don't necessarily say what's illegal or not. That's what the court does. Now, the police represent the laws, which is why you get arrested for stuff. But if it goes to court, then he'll be found guilty. What has angered people more than anything else is one rule for them and another rule for us. But I'll get onto that at the end of this, because I do want to finish with what she sent me. So the last little bit. Accordingly, I do not feel the case for Mr. Cummings' dismissal is made out on the evidence that has been presented to date. Moving beyond Mr. Cummings, it is important for us now to focus on the road to recovery, how we end lockdown, how we avoid a second wave, and how we recover and rebuild our economy. This is what I believe matters most and what I will continue to focus on in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you again for writing to me. Best regards, Natalie. And blah, 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 blah. So, essentially, what Natalie has said is there are, of course, two rules in this country. The elites get to do whatever they want. The rest of you, you do as we say. The reason why people were so angry is because loved ones were dying alone. Because the people who we see, the people who we look after, we weren't able to see. Now, my mum's birthday was in April, and it was incidentally a year since she started chemotherapy. We wanted to do stuff with her. The family wanted to take her out. We wanted to make this a special occasion, but we couldn't. And we knew that we couldn't. We knew that the right thing was to postpone it for as long as it takes. Because any one of us could have the virus and be asymptomatic. Dominic Cummings knew he was infected, and he broke quarantine rules. He then, as an excuse for getting caught or going to a tourist site, said he couldn't see, and that's why he put his child in a car. I could understand someone who comes out and says, okay, yeah, I took my kid to my parents 260 odd miles away. I know it was the wrong thing. I acted out of emotion. I wasn't thinking. I know it goes against the guidelines, but this is my son. I will take responsibility for what I've done. That would have been enough. No one would have batted an eyelid for that. Not a single person. But the fact that he came out, the fact that we all know he was asymptomatic, the fact that he's saying he's done nothing wrong, and the fact that Natalie Elphicke and so many other Conservatives are siding with him, it goes to show one very, very simple thing. We do not have representation. Dover does not have a Member of Parliament. Natalie Elphicke does not represent the people of Dover, Deal and the surrounding villages. She represents the wealthy elite. We deserve better.